I am Ginnie Graham, editorial writer with the Tulsa World. Oklahoma is one of 3 states with at least one Native American on its highest court, but it has no Hispanic jurists or any former public defenders on the bench. Nationally, more attention is being made to get diversity in the judiciary, particularly among the top courts. Ideally, the law would be applied equally by judges. But that has not been America's history, as generations of women and people of color were excluded from the legal professions. I spoke with University of Oklahoma law professor Joseph Tye, who said that it's essential that our judiciary, just like juries, reflect the diversity of the community. Law is not like computer code that you just input, and more perspectives make for better informed judicial decision-making. He suggested the question, was the killing of a black suspect by a police officer reasonable? An all-white bench would lack the life experiences and perspectives that a minority judge might offer. Or were the actions of a supervisor sexual harassment? An all-male court might interpret words or actions differently than a female judge. So that makes sense. Better decisions come from more robust debate among differing viewpoints and experiences. The Brennan Center for Justice recently updated its report on diversity among state Supreme Courts. Not surprisingly, the overall composition does not reflect America. It found that among all the state's high courts, 17% of justices are Black, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. However, 40% of the U.S. population falls into one or more of those categories. In addition, 51% of this country are women, but only 39% of the state Supreme Court seats are filled by women. It also found, looking at professional background, that most jurists come from private practice, about 81%, and about 68% had served as a judge, and many, about a third, have been former prosecutors, but only 7% have been public defenders. Data on the LGBT community representation wasn't available because of insufficient resources, according to the center, but it agreed that that is an important dimension to a diverse bench. So looking at Oklahoma, the state is one of about 12 using a merit-based system for nominating justice to its highest courts. And Oklahoma has 2 high courts. The state Supreme Court has the final word on civil matters. The Court of Criminal Appeals is the last stop for criminal decisions. So of the 9-member Supreme Court, 2 are women and 2 are citizens of Native American tribes. On the 5-member Court of Criminal Appeals, 1 is a woman and 1 is a Black jurist. That puts diversity at about 23% women and 23% people of color on each court. Oklahoma's population is about 50% women and 35% people of color. So it is not representative at this point. And none of the jurists on either court is an open member of the LGBT community. So it appears the system for nominating judges needs work to reflect the state's population and to have more varied professional backgrounds. The current system for nominating judges in the state comes from a bribery scandal that rocked the judiciary in the 1960s. That led to about a third of the jurists at that time being indicted for tax evasion, removed, or resigned. Out of the many reforms that came out of that time was the Judicial Nominating Commission. Anytime a vacancy is available on one of the state's highest courts, it is filled by this 15-member volunteer commission that interviews, backgrounds, and submits 3 candidates to the governor for consideration. The governor must take the nomination or the appointment from that nomination list. Voters every 6 years get to decide whether to retain those judges. This is a better system than the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal judgeship process that bends according to political winds and becomes fodder for legislative theatrics. Oklahoma's system has staved off scandal and partisan bickering, but it's not perfect. The commission has been criticized for a lack of transparency. The legislature could do more for openness, such as making candidates being considered public or posting votes of the members. This would shed light on the amount of diversity among the potential jurists. A legislative change that took effect in July may get closer to more representative courts, but it will take years to see what kind of difference this makes. Since 1968, the courts had been apportioned based on a very rigid geographic boundary. For example, Tulsa and Oklahoma City represented 2 of the 9 Supreme Court seats, but had 70% of the state's population living there. And so that excluded a sizable amount of potential candidates, particularly people of color. So in 2019, the legislature redrew apportionment among the courts. The Supreme Court now has 4 at-large seats and 5 representing each of the congressional districts. The Court of Criminal Appeal seats come from the congressional districts. This gets closer to fairness because congressional districts are based on census data. And the at-large Supreme Court seats will open up the entire state for nominations. A more diverse judiciary has to start with the Judicial Nominating Commission. Its members must be mindful to reflect the demographic composition of the state. It's an issue that gets at the heart of public trust in the legal system. Courts more accurately reflecting the population instill more faith in the decision makers and better serves all Oklahomans.